voice of the fan. Drop a bounce pass, throw down the rim rocker. Lay up off the glass right past the shot blocker. I follow through like Kobe's is money. You can cash it. For news on LA Hoops, come over to Beach Basket. Up-to-date sports, post-game reports, debates and play-by-play coming straight off the court. The voice of the fan, making noise, causing havoc. Zone a man up, you can ask Peach Basket. The Peach Basket, coming soon on air. The Peach Basket, where the news begins. We're dropping news like we're in the stands. Creative views from the average fans. The Peach Basket.
All right, it's Saturday night. That means it's time to run it back. We're the Peach Basket, a site that really endeavors to be more than just a site, but rather a community of like-minded basketball fans. That's who we are. That's what we do. We believe that all the NBA experts aren't all on TV. We've got a whole bunch of them here, and we'll talk about that as we kind of move along. This has been a ridiculously busy week in the NBA, and so personally, I was excited to get on today and talk a little bit about everything that went on. And on the heels of that incredible Game 7, there's just a lot to talk about. Joining me today is our LA Lakers lead writer, a big fan of the game as well as of the Lakers. Ajay, he is from the LA area, and I'm glad to have you here with us.
No, thank you for taking me in today, Jose. It's been crazy playoffs, man. A lot of good games. Throughout the whole playoffs, and today's a classic. That was a classic game today.
And I can't wait to talk about it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to recap the crazy week in NBA news. We're going to update our series predictions. We talked already about not all fans are on TV. We've got some fans here. We call them fan experts. We got some experts, rather, fan experts. We'll take a look at how our predictions went in the second round, and then some thoughts on the Clippers and Suns in tonight's Game 7. So hang out. We got about 15, 20 minutes of basketball talk. We're excited that you're here with us. So moving on, let's take a look at our second round predictions. We picked every game starting from the first round. We did really good. We got everything right. Second round, I'm happy to announce that we did it again. Our fan experts, before the series started, we had 54% pick the Clippers. So, I mean, admittedly, we weren't confident in the Clippers, but we thought they would win, and they did. And, I'll talk a little bit about this, but let's just kind of look at the numbers first, and then, we'll discuss a little bit. But most of the folks that picked the Clippers had them in 7. About 18% had them in 6. And then the group that picked the Jazz, you can see the numbers there. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we've got a little bit more to talk about tonight. But Stu is our Clippers writer, and he does a phenomenal job covering them. Doesn't normally join us on our shows. But when he is out, I generally kind of take in, a pinch hit for him. And, I've said before on this show that, I try to have, be real agnostic when it comes to fandom. I am in the LA area. I do follow the Lakers. I do follow the Clippers. I'm a West Coast Conference guy. But I try not to have, a fandom, because I think it kind of messes with your impartiality a little bit. But I have a soft spot in my heart for the Clippers, only because they've been so bad for so long. And it was neat to see them make history, beating the Jazz, especially when they were counted out after Kawhi went down. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. And so the only thing I'll leave you with before we go to the next one was the Clippers made Clipper history in that this is the first time they're in the Western Conference Final. But they made Clipper history by doing something. In other words, they did something the Clippers have never done by doing something no team in the NBA has ever done. And that's come back from an 0-2 hole in 2 series in a row. So pretty epic performance by the Clippers. Without Kawhi, we'll see how far it can take them. But, they had 24 hours to celebrate. Now they play tomorrow, which is pretty crazy against the Suns. So before we go to the next one, Jay, you're here with us, man. What are your thoughts? Do you have any on the Clippers and Jazz? Do you remember who you picked?
I don't remember what I picked, but what I'm more shocked about is like the backbone of the Clippers, because I'm a Laker fan, as you stated earlier. But just the history of LA, the Clippers are always the butt of the joke of LA. Like, oh, they're gonna
100%.
choke. the worst team, or they're going to fold in the playoffs, because we've seen it multiple times back from Lob City days, the Sam Cassell days. Like, they would have big leads, the Clippers, or like you think they have the control of the series, and then they would fold.
Yeah.
So as a Laker fan watching this game, I see the Jazz up by 25, and I'm like, oh, okay, like
It's over.
it's the regular Clippers again. You know, like
Yeah.
they're gonna fold. They're gonna go to Game 7, and then Utah's gonna pack it up. But this Clipper team, I get the sense, even as a Laker fan, like, oh no, this Clipper team is different from years past. They have backbone. They show grit and grind. Like, they're pulling out games that they're not supposed to win. And I give a bunch of credit to Ty Lue and Paul George, because Paul George was a bit of a joke ever since he got to LA too, because he had disaster after disaster, especially in the bubble. And Ty Lue, I think his coaching legacy, even though it's kind of short, it's cemented now. Because before, it was just like they weren't giving him credit because they said, oh, it was LeBron and Kyrie. They brought him back 3-1. Like, anyone could have coached that team and won a championship. But now that he's done it with the Clippers, down 0-2 against the Dallas Mavericks, and now the Utah Jazz, and Ty Lue has taken them to the Western Conference Finals, I feel like there's no way you can discredit Ty Lue as a head coach in this league no more. He's cemented as a top 3 coach in his league.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that that's coming from a Lakers fan. There's been a lot of, I don't want to call it controversy, but a lot of chatter on Twitter from Lakers fans. Ty Lue called out Laker fans and said, man, join us. You know, we're one city, you know, have our backs. And a lot of Laker fans, I think there's multiple buckets, right? There's Laker fans that don't care. They're not going to root for the Clippers, just like they're not going to root for the Suns. They just don't care. Then there's other fans that, you know, appreciate what the Clippers have done, and take a look at Ty Lue, a former Laker, Zubats, a former Laker, Rondo, a former Laker, you know, and say, man, I can get behind that team. They're from my city. They got some of the players that I was a fan of. So that's the other bucket of Laker guy. And then there's the other bucket of Laker fans that just hate the Clippers. And it's tough. It's tough. I don't understand the hatred. Well, I do. I mean, they blame the Clippers for CP3. They blame the Clippers for being in LA. They blame the Clippers for being in Staples Center, and I get all of that. But yeah, it's tough. I'd hope that, you know, the city could rally around this team, because they are pretty exciting to watch. But right on, the Clippers against the Suns, we'll talk about in just a little bit. Let's go on to the next prediction. This is the Game 7 we all just got done watching. I can't find my mouse now. Hold on. There it is. And this is just, I mean, I'm shocked. This game was amazing. Even with, you know, 2 minutes left, I had no idea who was going to win, you know, but if I had to bet money, I would have bet on the Nets. They looked more confident. The Bucks looked like they could make a bucket. How the Bucks pulled this off was amazing. You know, we'll talk a little bit about it, but here's our pick before the series started. We were a lot more confident in the Bucks winning than we were in the Clippers. 63% picked the Bucks. I can tell you, I picked the Bucks because generally defense wins over offense. Now the Nets argument is a good one. There's no Kyrie. And that certainly would have changed things, or could have changed things. But generally speaking, a good defensive team is going to beat a good offensive team. And I felt, you know, and we talked a little bit about this, you know, offline on our channel, that, you know, I felt like a little bit of the blame has to go to the rookie coach, Steve Nash. I just thought he wore his team down. Kevin Durant was asked to do too much. He played 50 minutes or something, I think you said. I mean, just a ridiculous amount of time. And you know, it showed in that last shot. He just couldn't get any lift, and he airballed it. Amazing player, taking nothing away from his legacy, but that was a tough way to go out. Great game, an amazing Game 7. I don't know how you watch that and don't love the game. What are your thoughts on that game we just witnessed?
The game was a classic for sure. I was on the edge of my seat throughout the whole game, and as much as great as this game was, it just reminded me of the series, how frustrating it could be to watch the Milwaukee Bucks, honestly. Because the Bucks take so many dumb shots, but I'm in my head, I'm thinking like, dude, that you guys have the length, you guys have the height. Just because you were taking and making that many threes in the regular season, you have the one advantage you can use to against the Nets, and why don't you use that? So then that's why when I kept watching this game, I was like, dude, I felt like the Bucks backed into this win, honestly, especially after the ending of
Right.
the Brook Lopez thing. And there's so many mental mistakes. Charles Barkley even said it the other day on the broadcast, like he feels like the Milwaukee Bucks are going to win a championship, but this may be like the dumbest championship, like as far as basketball IQ wise, because you got Giannis out here taking 10 threes, and those in my book are like turnovers because he's not a great shooter. So those are going to be long rebounds that lead to fast break points. And then Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are like showing up here and there and not showing up. But it's frustrating to watch the Bucks at times, but I give them credit. They ended up pulling up the series, even if they backed into it. And yeah, that's my opinion on the Bucks. It might be one of the dumbest teams, as Charles Barkley would say, IQ wise, because it is just frustrating to watch the Bucks at times.
It's hard hearing that, as a fan, I'm sure, of the Bucks, and in my opinion, the greatest player of all time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a former Buck, coming out and saying this team can't win the NBA championship recently. It's wild. This team does not look to make good basketball decisions. The Brook Lopez play was indicative of who this team has been, but they're so talented that they keep winning. And this definitely felt like a victory they backed into, not one that they took, which is rough. But they're in. They beat the team that I think everybody expected to be in. So credit to Milwaukee. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm going to give credit to the Brooklyn Nets a little bit because before the series, people were saying they don't play defense or whatnot.
Right.
But to be a championship team doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a great defensive team 40 minutes. You just have to play great defense in certain moments. And the Brooklyn Nets throughout the series, they did play great defense in certain moments, and that's how they got a couple wins. Besides that historic game from KD, like today, they played great defense and moments. Like how we talked about the Clippers not folding, the Bucks used to fold under pressure. For example, when they played against Toronto, but the Bucks did not fold today in those crucial moments. So I'm gonna give Brooklyn a little bit of a credit today. Yeah. They did their job. It's just the Bucks didn't fold, and they got a little bit lucky. And sometimes that's all it takes to win a series.
100%. No, they showed up defensively a lot more than I thought they had in them. To be honest, I thought I thought their intent was to win games 140 to 130, but they played defensively. They offensively, and they played when they needed to, which is what you've got to do in today's NBA. The NBA is different, man. We talk about the length of Giannis and take advantage of your length. If you're not shooting threes and you're not dunking, the mid-range game is all but gone. There's just not a lot of people doing it. It's just a different kind of game, and the Bucks. I don't know that they figured it out exactly. What are we? Are we a 3-point shooting team, or are we, a dunking team? That's a thing. But what's your identity? And I'm just not sure the Bucks have one yet.
I think the Bucks are just lucky this year. Not only do they have the talent to overcome these IQ mistakes they're making, but the amount of injuries that are going around in these playoffs has led to a perfect road to them to win a championship as well, in my opinion.
No doubt. And that would be a story in and of itself, the injuries, which is a good segue into the breaking news, the news of the week. The intent of our show really is to take a look back at the week that was. And that's what we generally like to do. This week, there was too much. I mean, I tweeted not too long ago that it was like drinking water from a fire hose. It was too much news. I mean, it was just coming out, a minute after minute. It was ridiculous. This is an overview of what happened last week. Chris Paul, health and safety protocols. We don't know how long, which is wild. Donnie Nelson, longtime Mavericks exec, out. Which came shortly after, we heard about Luka maybe not being in Dallas long-term. Stan Van Gundy out in New Orleans. The Mavericks and Rick Carlisle parting ways, which, just begs the question, what is happening in Dallas? Scotty Brooks and the Wizards have parted ways. I'm a big fan of Brooks. I think he's a great coach, and I'm excited to see where he's going to end up. We talked about the Clippers. The Clippers made history by doing something the Clippers have never done and doing something no team in the association has ever done. So congrats to them. Kawhi Leonard, we found out was out. We don't know for how long. We don't know if it's ACL, if it's just a twisted foot. We know he had a baby that nobody knew about. Again, all shrouded in secrecy, very odd. What else happened? I know there was more. Did I miss one? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nina, yeah, this was a bit surprising. I think this came out today. The trainer for the Lakers, her contract expired and it just wasn't re-up, so it's not like she was let go. But they did not keep her. She was the head trainer for 2 seasons, was with the team for about 10. Kobe swore by her. Josh Hart today said, she's awesome. Lakers let her go. Kind of the fall guy, unfortunately, for all of these injuries. Celtics traded Kemba Walker, which is an unusual trade during the playoffs. And then finally, LeBron James ripping the NBA, saying, I told you all of these injuries were going to happen. That was all really not over the course of a week. That was over the course of a couple of days. All of this happened. So this is what we're going to do. We can't talk in detail about each one. So, Ajay and I are going to take one and just kind of elaborate a little bit. Ajay, you go first. Which one do you want to talk about?
The first one I want to talk about is Chris Paul and health and safety protocols, because that's a game changer along with Kawhi Leonard being out. Yeah. I think because that series is 50-50 without those 2 stars. If everybody was healthy, I would probably pick the Clippers in 6 or 7. But because of the injuries, you kind of got to do the weighing. Yeah. Who is more important to their team or can win 1 or 2 games without their stars. And I think the Clippers, it's so tough to call because I think the Phoenix Suns can win their games without Chris Paul, 1 or 2. But I think the Clippers are going to need Kawhi Leonard to win the series. So I think the Suns are going to win the series. But the problem is, how long is Chris Paul out for? Because the way Ernie on TNT broke it down, he said Chris Paul has to get 2 negative tests in a row since he's vaccinated. He has to get them both 24 hours apart. And then he has to take a cardiac test and pass that, and then he's eligible to come back in the series. So it could be as sooner than 10 days, or it could be later than 10 days. So that's the thing. Chris Paul's already out for game 1, but is he going to be out for game 2, 3, and 4? Right. We don't know when he's coming back. And just to tag this along, Kawhi Leonard, no one knows how long he's out for. And I told other Clipper friends, because I have friends that are Clipper fans, I told them, if there's any superstar that doesn't push his body, which is a good and bad thing, through certain injuries, it's Kawhi Leonard, because he's load managing Toronto. We've seen him in San Antonio. He's literally sat the whole season because of an injury he didn't want to push through, which is, whether fair or not, he got crucified by the San Antonio media for not pushing through that injury and helping that team make a run in the playoffs. So it's up in the air with these 2 guys. At least I know Chris Paul's coming back. That's why I lean towards the Suns to win the series. But Kawhi Leonard, I just have no idea if this injury is that serious or whatnot.
Yeah. They're shrouded in secrecy, which has been something Kawhi has always been big about, right? We didn't know who he was signing when he was a free agent. And he was picking between the Lakers and the Clippers. We went to the last minute, which is another reason Laker fans, I think, don't like Clippers because of that. But you're right. We don't know. What I can say, just putting on my Clipper hat for a minute, I think the Clippers rather have caught lightning in a bottle, so to speak, with the emergence of Terrence Mann. A lot of people are discovering him for the first time now, but he has been good for a long time. Not great, I'm not thinking 39 points and what he did in Game 6. I'm not saying that's who he is, but he has been a solid role player for a really long time, multiple games. So we've seen this bubbling up if you watch a lot of Clipper games. So right now they need him to be really good. They need Marcus Morris to be really good. They've got really, really good role players that collectively could make up the 27 points, 11 rebounds that Kawhi, normally contributes. So I think the Clippers can fill that gap better than, the Suns and Chris Paul, like you were saying. I think the Clippers are better without Kawhi than the Suns are without Chris Paul. The Suns without Chris Paul, admittedly went 8-0 in the bubble. They're very good. But, I think Chris Paul definitely puts them over the top. They're a different team with him. And Cameron Payne, his backup, is a really good player. I think he's dangerous. He can go off. He's very streaky, but he's not Chris Paul. There's not many players that are. So even if Chris Paul comes back, which I fully expect him to, let's say he misses a game or 2, I think the Clippers, again, have caught lightning in a bottle. They're figuring stuff out. I'm glad to hear you give Ty Lue a lot of, some props there. He deserves them. I think he's done a really good job managing this team. And so, yeah, I kind of think that the Clippers are going to be okay. But, we'll see. We'll see how things play out. The only other thing I think here that I, kind of want to talk about, I've already talked a little bit about, the Lakers parting with their trainer. I guess I'm a little just, again, confused about Dallas. When you've got a generational talent like Luka Doncic, you do everything you can to keep him and make him happy. I mean, that's what I would do, right? 100%. If he doesn't like the coach is gone. If he doesn't like the GM is gone. If he doesn't like particular players, they're gone. So at least from the outside looking in, that's kind of what I think is happening, maybe during an exit interview. Luka was very open. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. And the Mavericks are making changes. They are amazing. They're incredible changes. I mean, they're franchise altering changes. And we'll see. The first thing I thought of was Magic Johnson in the 80s. Didn't like Paul Westhead, the coach. And he made it clear he didn't like Paul Westhead. And what do you know? Paul Westhead is gone.
He's gone.
And Pat Riley is in. Obviously, that worked out really well for the Lakers. But I don't know how this is going to work out for the Mavs. But I do wonder, and I'm curious of your thoughts. What's happening in Dallas? What do you think is happening in Dallas? Because I don't think anybody knows.
I was going to say, before I get into the situation, what I thought was funny about the whole situation is that Athletic was the first one to report like all these troublings happening within the organization. And then Mark Cuban was saying like, oh no, there's no trouble in this organization. Like we're not going to fire head coach Rick Carlisle because the grass is not greener always on the other side. And then a couple of days later, you just see all these changes happening. And I credit that all these moves. I'm like, man, that's some great journalism. It just took out the whole Mavericks organization like that. I credit that to journalism right there. But no, what I see from the Mavericks is like what a typical franchise should do. Like, dude, Luka is a generational talent. Like, if you let him go or if he leaves Dallas, you're not going to see another player like that for another 20 years. Dallas is even lucky to transition from Dirk to Luka. Not many franchises get lucky to transition from one superstar to another superstar like that. So this is just Dallas doing his job, doing whatever Luka wants, so he can sign that 5-year super max deal and he stays locked in. Whatever happens after that, though, I'm going to be cautious of Dallas. I don't think Luka is going to be a Dallas Maverick forever. I do agree with the Athletic reporting. Like, I think Luka is just going to sign that deal, and maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, we're going to be looking back and say, oh, Luka demands a trade. I don't know to where, because obviously a lot of things can happen. And depending on the cap space for certain teams and the assets that move around, we'll see who can get Luka. But I don't think Luka is going to end up in Dallas long term. But for right now, he'll be in Dallas. The Mavericks are just trying to appease him any way possible.
Yeah, which is the right thing to do. And, one other bit of news that we didn't add here, Mavericks related, the Mavericks brought in Dirk Nowitzki. I think that happened today as a special advisor. So a couple people out, Dirk is in. We'll see. I'm fascinated by it, but I do think Luka is a once in a generation talent. He's that good, and he's only 22, I think 23.
Yeah,
stupid. I mean, my gosh,
can't let that go.
You cannot let that go. You got to keep him happy. So, I think the only other one, let's touch on it real quick, was the Celtics trading Kemba. I thought it was very interesting because also not added here and should have been. What kind of got the first domino roll in terms of Celtics was Brad Stevens. Some people say he failed up, right? He's the president. They're bringing in a new coach. Now, his first thing as an executive, the first thing he does is he gets rid, I think it was 2 days after he got his promotion, he gets rid of his point guard. That, to me, is really telling. Of course, there's some cap space rationale behind it. But I didn't think Kemba, was bad. I'm kind of surprised by the move, but they're bringing in Horford. They've got a pick. They've got Moses Brown, who I understand to be. I don't know anything about Moses, but I understand him to be a pretty good, piece that the Celtics are going to take a look at. So it's interesting. I said at the start of these playoffs that there were two franchises that had a lot riding on how these playoffs went for them, the Celtics and the Clippers.
Yep.
The Celtics bowed out early, and we're starting to see, some rumblings. Clippers are still alive.
Yep.
So yeah, it's interesting to me. What's happening in Dallas is fascinating. What's happening in Boston is interesting because they've got to build around the Jays. Jaylen Brown and
Jaylen Brown, Jason
Tatum. I knew that. I would have got it, but I didn't right away. And we'll see how they do it. We got to see how they do it. Any thoughts on Boston?
Yeah, I think Boston, like you said, we're starting to see the turn of organization. I will not be surprised if down the line we see Marcus Smart get traded for someone. I think they're going to not do a complete blow up because a complete blow would be trading one of the two, Tatum or Brown. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brown gets traded for maybe a player on a cheaper contract or maybe some draft assets to help build his team better. Because the Celtics got a lot of missing holes on this team for sure. And it was really telling that Brad Stevens did trade Kemba Walker 2 days in. So that kind of really tells you the tension they probably did have when it was a player and coach relationship. And I have a different opinion with you against Kemba. I didn't think Kemba was necessarily bad for the Celtics, but the problem was he was so injury prone that the money that you're paying Kemba Walker, you need not superstar production because there's no superstars like Kyrie or Chris Paul we're talking about. But you need all-star production numbers, and the problem is the best availability is when you're available. And Kemba's not available most of the time, so that's the reason that contract was bad, and that's probably why the Celtics had to throw in that draft pick in order to dump his contract to Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah, 2025 second-round pick went as well to OKC.
Yeah.
Injuries, obviously, this is I read earlier that this was the most injury-prone season since 2009. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but people are surmising that it's because there's a short off season, there's a compressed schedule. Even these playoffs, man, it's every 2 days. There's just a lot of basketball in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
So everybody's getting hurt, unfortunately. And LeBron James saw it coming, according to
he ripped the NBA.
He did, and it's good. Somebody's got to, and when LeBron speaks, people tend to listen. Let's end on this note. We have our first conference final set. I think we've already, certainly from you've already kind of teased. We talked a little bit about this already, but we don't have to etch this in stone. But I guess initial reaction to Phoenix Suns versus Los Angeles Clippers, knowing what you know now. Let's figure Chris Paul misses 2 games. I'm expecting Kawhi not to be there at all. Who you got?
Then we'll go Phoenix. Just because I know I think just because Chris Paul is coming back, and I think Phoenix is good enough to split home court the first 2 games 1-1. And as long as you get Chris Paul back for either game 3 or game 4, you can steal one in LA and then maybe win this series in 6. So I'm going to go Suns just because I know Chris Paul is more likely to come back than Kawhi Leonard is to come back for the Clippers.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see Kawhi coming back. CP likely, I think absolutely will. I'd be really shocked if he doesn't. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in game 1, personally speaking. I know that that's not how health and protocol works, but I just have a feeling I wouldn't be surprised to see him lace him up for game 1. But the only reason I feel like the Clippers can win this is because – again, lightning in a bottle. They feel right now like one of those Cinderella teams that you see in March Madness in college basketball. They're on a roll. They're playing well. They understand. This is a team that understands their role, which is what they didn't have last year, right? Last year they had some players that kind of you didn't like the preferential treatment Kawhi and PG were getting. These guys seem to understand their role better, and right now, they're just shooting lights out. They shot 70% in the second half of that game against the Jazz. They're just shooting really well, and they're peaking at the right time. The scary thing for me when it comes to Phoenix, as great as Chris Paul is, though, is Devin Booker. Devin Booker is just a phenomenal player who scored 70 points in a basketball game, which in and of itself is amazing. But he loves playing in LA, right? He's a big fan of Kobe's. clearly emotionally distraught when Kobe left us. And when he is in Staples Center, I just think he just channels that Kobe energy, man. He's just special. And so it's one thing to play somebody on the home court, but when they're on your home turf and they kind of get a little energy, they play well. That's tough, man. That's tough. So the only thing the Clippers can hope to do is that Paul George and Devin Booker kind of cancel each other out. That's what they can hope for. And then it's a battle of the others. And I think the Clippers, even without Kawhi, their others are better than the Phoenix Suns others, including Chris Paul. Also, kind of as a side note, Chris Paul and Rajon Rondo do not like each other. So Rondo did not get a lot of time against Utah. I expect him to get quite a bit of time, kind of needling Chris Paul. That'll be a fun matchup, I think.
Yeah. Another key battle for that series, if the Suns are going to have a good chance of winning it, is going to be DeAndre Ayton in the paint against the Clippers big. Because what Ibaka's off for the playoffs, right? They said it's reported that he's done. Ibaka's not coming back, right?
Shoulder or back surgery. Yeah, he's done. He's not coming back. Yeah, so they went small against Utah.
Yeah. So the only problem with the Utah series, and we saw during the series, Rudy Gobert got exposed because he's just a defensive guy. But if you put him in the pick and roll, he couldn't guard those players well. The Phoenix Suns, they're going to need DeAndre Ayton to be the opposite of Gobert, which is get your 20 points like you did against the Lakers and the Denver Nuggets. Get your about 8 to 10 rebounds and get a couple blocks. You don't have to be fantastic on defense in the paint like Gobert, but if DeAndre Ayton can provide those numbers again, that's going to be another huge advantage for the Suns as well.
And this is where Ty Lue gets a lot of credit. He recognized how to wear down Gobert, and he did it. And I think they'll start against the Suns the way they finished against Utah. That's with Batum in the middle. A big guy, but certainly not a center. But if he's starting to get worked by Ayton, then you're going to see a lot of time from DeMarcus Cousins, who looked really good in the spot minutes he got, and Zubac, who's these are big guys that they can put up against Ayton. And that's what I'm saying, man. The Clippers have got a lot of pieces. It's just whether Ty Lue rather can make them fit. And he's done it so far. I think Ty Lue is going to do it again. But good call. I think Ayton is going to be a big piece of this puzzle for the Suns. All right, man. Well, I'm excited. Basketball. If you're a fan, this is the best time of year. So we will be back next week talking about the next Game 7. And we'll also obviously be a couple of games into the conference finals. So we get together every Saturday night, 8 o'clock Pacific, to run it back, where the Peach Basket, a site dedicated to all things basketball, community of fan experts. If you're watching and you love the game, you might be a fan expert. We'd love to hear from you. Jay, appreciate the time. Thanks again. We'll talk next week.
Jose.
All right, y'all.
Have a good one.
The voice of the fan. Drop a bounce pass, throw down the rim rocker. Lay up off the glass right past the shot blocker. I follow through like Kobe's is money. You can cash it. For news on LA Hoops, come over to Peach Basket. Up-to-date sports, post-game reports, debates and play-by-play coming straight off the court. The voice of the fan making noise, causing havoc. Zone a man up, you can ask Peach Basket. The Peach Basket, coming soon on air. The Peach Basket, where the news begins. We're dropping news like we're in the stands. Creative views from the average fans. The Peach